On July 15, 1992, in the fog-drenched coastal town of Blackwood Bay, a man who had spent his entire life upholding the law committed a crime that would stain the town's history forever. Judge Arthur Sterling was a man of immense respect, known for his cold logic and a career that was absolutely flawless. He lived in a grand, secluded mansion known as the Willow Estate with his wife, Catherine, and their 3 daughters, Eleanor, the eldest, Jane, the middle child, and Rose, the youngest. To the outside world, the Sterlings were the definition of high society and perfection. Arthur was seen as a pillar of the community, a man whose judgment was final and whose morality was unquestioned. However, as Arthur approached his mandatory retirement in the winter of 1992, a dark and silent shift occurred within his mind. He became obsessed with the purity of his family's reputation and social standing. He began to suffer from a twisted delusion that once he lost his title and the power of his office, his family would descend into a life of common struggle, poverty, and disgrace. In his warped reality, the only way to save them from the filth of an ordinary life was to ensure they never had to live it. Arthur began a calculated, slow-motion plan. He started by spending hours in the mansion's vast gardens, staring at the soil. He ordered his longtime groundskeeper to dig 2 deep, rectangular trenches in specific locations. One was directly outside the master suite's window, and the other was at the far eastern edge of the property, strangely positioned right in the line of sight of the local sheriff's patrol route. When the groundskeeper questioned the depth of the holes, Arthur calmly explained that he was installing a complex, deep-root irrigation system for a new species of rare winter roses he had imported from Europe. He insisted that the holes remain open for weeks to air out the soil, a request that seemed odd but was never challenged because no one dared to question the judge. The first act of the nightmare began on a stormy night in late February. Arthur had meticulously planned a staff appreciation weekend, giving all his household servants, drivers, and cleaners a paid 3-day holiday. For the first time in years, the Willow Estate was empty of witnesses. In the dead of night, while the rain masked any sound, Arthur moved through the silent, mahogany-lined hallways of his mansion. He entered the master bedroom where Catherine was sleeping. Using a heavy, antique iron fireplace rod, he delivered the final judgment. He then moved to Eleanor's room and did the same. With the cold precision of a man who had spent 30 years looking at evidence, he carried them to the first trench outside the window. He spent the remainder of the night scrubbing the floors with industrial bleach. When the staff returned on Monday morning, Arthur was sitting at the breakfast table, reading the newspaper. He calmly explained that Catherine and Eleanor had caught an early morning flight to visit an ill relative in London. He even showed them a forged telegram as proof. His deception grew deeper when his 2 younger daughters, Jane and Rose, returned from their universities for spring break a week later. For 10 agonizing days, Arthur played the part of the doting, grieving father. He told them their mother and sister were simply delayed in Europe. He took Jane and Rose for walks in the garden every afternoon, fresh earth of the first trench, discussing the future. The neighbors saw a peaceful family scene, unaware they were witnessing a predator stalking his own children. On their final night at the estate, Arthur prepared a final farewell dinner. After they went to sleep, he repeated his horrific actions. He placed Jane and Rose in the second trench near the edge of the woods. The next morning, he told the remaining staff that a friend in a black sedan had picked the girls up at dawn to take them back to school. To finalize his escape, Arthur typed dozens of personalized letters to friends, colleagues, and the courthouse, stating that he had decided to take his pension and move the family to a private villa in the Swiss Alps for a fresh start. He sold off the family's expensive furniture, shuttered the windows of the Willow Estate, and vanished without a trace. He didn't flee to Switzerland. Instead, he moved between small, anonymous motels, living like a ghost. The deception lasted for nearly 5 months until a suspicious relative, troubled by the fact that Catherine's voice was never heard on the phone, hired a private investigator. They tracked Arthur to a roadside motel in a neighboring state. When the police finally cornered him in room 12, the judge realized his perfect record was finally broken. There was no struggle. He simply sat on the edge of the bed, asked for a pen, and wrote a final, chilling confession. I have protected them from the world. They will never know the pain of being ordinary. He then tried to end his life with a concealed blade, but the officers intervened. The final discovery at Willow Estate was the most haunting part of the investigation. Forensic teams, guided by the strange, isolated placement of the rosebushes Arthur had planted, uncovered the 2 trenches. The town watched in horror as the 4 bodies were recovered from the garden. There were no signs that any of them had fought back. They had died in their sleep, trusting the man who was supposed to be their ultimate protector. Arthur Sterling, the man who had sent hundreds of people to death row and prison, found himself on the other side of the bars. He refused to show remorse, maintaining until the end that his actions were an act of love. In late 1996, Arthur Sterling was executed by the state. The Willow Estate was eventually demolished, as no one would ever live in a house where a father's final judgment had been so silent and so deadly. This tragedy highlights a critical truth. Success is not a shield against mental collapse. Arthur Sterling was an intelligent, high-achieving man, yet he was destroyed by his own ego and a toxic obsession with social status. The lesson for us is to understand that our worth is not tied to our titles. When we become too focused on perfection and what people will think, we risk losing our humanity. This story also teaches the importance of community intervention. Neighbors and staff saw the strange holes and the crimson water, but they were intimidated by the judge's status. It reminds us that we must always prioritize human life over social hierarchy. If something feels wrong, speak up, no matter how powerful the person involved may be. True justice is not just found in a courtroom. It is found in the courage to look out for one another before it's too late.